The Holy Spirit leads us where we need to be. And sometimes that's not where we plan to go, but it's where we need to be. 45 years ago, after serving several years on a submarine, the Navy sent me to the Naval Research Lab at Stennis Space Center. And our plan, my wife and I and our 2-week-old son, was to buy a house, fix it up, and at the end of 2 years, flip it, and then move on to the next duty station. The Holy Spirit had other plans. We're still working on the house. So the Holy Spirit brings us where we need to be. And we see that in today's first reading from Acts of the Apostles. Paul is on the first leg of his second missionary journey, something that he did around 50 to 53 AD. So it's maybe a 3-year journey on his second missionary tour. And he has his trusty companion Timothy with him. And so he starts off in eastern Turkey, and he's going west. And he's visiting all the churches that he established on his first missionary journey. Okay, so that was like 2-3 years prior to that. And he's given them the good news from the Council of Jerusalem. So that was like a year earlier. And that council said that the Gentile converts that are becoming Christians, the pagans that are becoming Christians, they do not have to be Jews first and then become Christians. In other words, they don't have to go through circumcision. They don't have to follow the Jewish dietary laws, all that. So they're rejoicing about that. And Paul is strengthening those churches as he's going through them. And then he gets to Antioch in Turkey. So it's like central Turkey. That's as far west as he was able to make it in his first missionary journey. So he's ready to continue west. And he loves to go to places where people had never heard of Christ. I mean, that was Paul's mission, and to start new churches and stuff. So he decides to go south and southwest along the southern coast of Turkey on the Med toward Ephesus. But it said the Spirit prevented him from going there. So he and Timothy, they turned north. So they started going toward the Black Sea. And said the Spirit prevented them from going that way too. And so they end up going all the way to the northwest corner of Turkey. And that's where Paul has this dream where the Macedonian appears to him. Think of Macedonia, someplace like northern Greece area. And he invites them to come in to Macedonia and preach the good news there and tell people about Christ. And what does he do? He does that, and that's where the Philippians lived, and that's where the Thessalonians lived. And so he established churches in their communities. And that's kind of where we are with this reading. But not to leave you hanging on his missionary journey, he ends up, after he establishes those churches, he goes south through Greece, brief stop in Athens, and then he spends 1.5 years in Corinth. Remember our letters to the Corinthians in Corinth, and then he decides to return. But he goes across the Aegean Sea back to Turkey, and then he goes to Ephesus, where he originally wanted to go to begin with, and stays like a couple of weeks there, and then south 500 miles across the Mediterranean Sea back to Jerusalem. And so the Holy Spirit led him to where he needed to be, and it wasn't where he had planned to be. And the same thing happens to us, where God leads us to where we need to be. And God's plans are much better for us than our own plans if we can be docile to them. And so we should pray today for the light to see God's will in our lives, because it is so much better than our own will. And we should also ask God to help us to be docile to the promptings of the Holy Spirit, so that we can follow the Holy Spirit's guidance in our lives, just the way Timothy and Paul did on that second missionary journey.